Hello. Today we're going to cast our literary lens over the character of Macduff, who takes the baton off Banquo to become Macbeth's foremost foe or enemy. And he's a fascinating, charismatic guy, is Macduff. A real troublemaker, very troublesome character, motivated by this unswerving loyalty to Scotland and the righteous royal line, i.e. Malcolm and Duncan. As a rule of thumb in this play, wherever Macduff rocks up, in fact sometimes even if he's just mentioned, tension and conflict are sure to follow. This guy is like a sandpaper enema, very abrasive and makes life highly uncomfortable for the Macbeths. I'll say this for Macduff: he'd make a great detective, very observant, very cynical, always questioning things. No surprise then that he grows to be a real thorn in the side of Macbeth, until of course in the final act Macduff reveals that he's not of woman born and promptly lops Macbeth's head off. It's funny, Macduff's first line of dialogue in this play is a bit of banter with the porter, a bit of light-hearted badinage before he goes off to wake Duncan. And it's funny because this is probably the last time in the play that we see Macduff truly happy until the final lines of the play. Don't forget, this is the poor schmuck that finds Duncan's blood-blitzed body, and I suspect right from the off he suspects there's something a bit fishy about the circumstances surrounding Duncan's death. I mean, he's in Macbeth's face, questioning him, why'd you kill the guards? And when Lady Macbeth pipes up, oh, it's awful that Duncan should be killed in our house, he's right back at her. No, it's awful that this should happen any place. So you see, even from the start, Macduff is not the kind of character prepared to go along to get along. It's all curt questions, blunt corrections that really rattles the Macbeths. And those suspicions get ramped up to top gear in Act 2, Scene 4, when Macbeth says that he believes the guards were suborned, hired killers in the pay of somebody else, somebody more powerful. He also says in this scene that he's not going to go and watch Macbeth be crowned the new king. This is what I mean. Macduff is not a guy who goes along to get along. If you're a thane and there's a new king being crowned, your not being there is rude at best, treasonous at worst. But as he says to Ross and some other old boy in the same scene, I fear, says Macduff, I fear our old robes sit easier than our new. Translation, Duncan, the old robes, will be a better, more legitimate ruler than Macbeth, the new robes. So he's not exactly head of the Macbeth fan club, he's our boy Macduff. So, to sum up, to put it on a bumper sticker, Macduff is immediately suspicious about the circumstances surrounding Duncan's death, and he's curt and blunt and defiant in his dealings with the Macbeths. Have you ever seen one of those Jackie Chan films where about 8 guys spring out at Jackie and he hammers them to a pulp using little more than a stepladder and a penny whistle? Well, ask yourself, do we really care about the personalities of those attacking thugs? Are their personalities or identities or backstories or motivations that relevant? And the answer is no, not really. So what are they there for? What's their function in the story? Well, simply put, they're there to make Jackie Chan look good. Jackie cements his hero credentials by kicking them to Burgundy. And this is not unusual in stories, and I don't care if it's Macbeth highbrow stuff or action films lowbrow stuff. Minor characters being used to give some information about the main protagonist. So when Macduff's name is kicked up by the witches in Act 4, Scene 1, because Macbeth has run back to the witches, seeking a bit of reassurance because he was all freaked out on seeing Banquo's ghost. When Macduff's name is offered up by the witches, it's not because Macduff is such an intrinsically fascinating character. No, Macduff's name is thrown out here in order to shed some light on Macbeth's character. And in a second, you'll see just what I'm honking on about. The witches then tell Macbeth to beware Macduff. But they also tell Macbeth that he himself is invincible. Macbeth cannot be killed. Well, what does Macbeth do here? Well, I'm paraphrasing, but he basically says, well, I don't have to kill Macduff, but I'm going to do it anyway. So Macduff is like a wizard in this scene. He's not even present, and yet that reference to his character is still fulfilling a function in this play. It's shedding light on Macbeth's character. And there's two key things that this reference to Macduff reveals here. Firstly, it's telling us that Macbeth is still anxious. He went to the witches to have his fears calmed. His fears have been fueled, almost as if these witches were evil manipulators or something. He still feels unsafe. Secondly, and I would argue more importantly, this character, this reference to Macduff, highlights the true depths of Macbeth's depravity now. Macbeth, prepared to kill a man he does not have to. He really is a fully fledged, unequivocally evil villain. So this is all down to a reference to Macduff, a character who's not even there in the scene, fulfilling a function, shedding light on Macbeth's nature. I was listening to this academic once talking about Macbeth. Big woofly beard on him, down to his corduroy patches on his arms. And he's given it this about Macbeth. He says, ultimately, Macbeth is a meditation on masculinity. I remember at the time thinking, calm down, Grandad. Lay off those words as originals because the sugar rush is going to your head. This is a play about ambition. But you know what? The older I get, the more I realise that old boy was bang on the money. This play is all about manhood and masculinity. The play kicks off. You've got Duncan praising, eulogising Macbeth for kicking ass on the battlefield. He calls him a noble gentleman for ripping through hordes of Norwegian soldiers. How does Lady Macbeth coerce Macbeth into killing Duncan? She questions his manhood. She says, what? You're not prepared to do something as brave and violent as regicide? Well, dust off your pink tutu, princess. You ain't no man. Even Macbeth himself tries a similar dodge, doesn't he? He persuades some assassins to kill Banquo by suggesting if they do that, they will be a higher class of man. So all through this play, the theme of masculinity permeates. And you know what? It's a very narrow, depressingly narrow definition of masculinity. Because surely there is more to being a man than swanking around the place, biffing people. Then up steps Macduff, who expands or redefines what it means to be manly. Act 4, Scene 3, and he's just found out that his entire family has been slaughtered. Wife, children, lock, stock and barrel. Not surprisingly, Macduff is crushed. He's with Malcolm at the time, and Malcolm appears to have a similar idea as Duncan and Macbeth towards masculinity, because Malcolm says, oh, that's very sad, but dispute it like a man. Translation, suck it up, champ, big boys don't cry. Now, Macduff's reply is a real zinger, because he says, yeah, I will dispute it, but I will also feel it like a man. Translation, displaying softer emotions like grief and guilt, he feels shocking guilt what's happened to his family. That doesn't dilute his sense of manliness, his manhood. I will feel it like a man. Here's the news. Revealing softer emotions is acceptable, and Macduff here really demonstrates a more enlightened view to masculinity than most characters in this play are prepared to entertain. And that's Macduff, folks, Scotland's super suspicious Caesarean-born saviour, a fellow loyal to the true family line, the true royal line, and making like a supersonic egg whisk in stirring up Macbeth's sense of security with his contrary actions and dialogue. Also, this is a character defying the toxic masculinity that characterises the society of the play, offering us perhaps a more enlightened concept of manhood or masculinity. So, Macduff, the true hero of this tragedy? No, of course he's not. Don't be stupid. The clue's in the title. However, he is an interesting character. Right, I'm going to mothball my mouth, leave you good people to your day. Best of luck in that exam hall.